Hello, everyone. This is Phil Cisneros' World of Possibilities podcast, and I am thrilled today to have with us as our guest Laurie Woodward, an educator as well as an author of several incredible books. And I'm so pleased to have her here and share with you her inspiration for writing and her creativity in writing books and also who she's been as an educator and the impact she's had on young people. So, Laurie, welcome.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
Oh, great, great. And you're situated in what city, Laurie?
I'm on the central coast of California, in between Santa Maria and San Luis Obispo.
Okay, great, great. I know that area because I used to live in the area.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and so great to have you on today. And I'm very interested in what was your background and where you were born and how everything got started for you. Was there any support you got from family about writing or creativity, etc.? So tell us a little bit about you and your background in growing up.
Well, I'm a California kid, multi-generational, going back many generations. My great grandparents were from Northern California, ranchers and so on up in Red Bluff, Redding, Chico area. I was born in Chico to very young parents, shotgun wedding.
Ah,
But my parents made it work, and even though they were a couple teenagers themselves, they made it work, and we lived in Chico until I was in third grade. My brother was born, and then we moved down to the Central Coast, California, and lived on the Central Coast until I was a teenager. And I lived in Texas for a short period because my stepfather was in the cattle business. And then we moved to Camarillo, and then we came full circle. And interestingly enough, when we moved away from Santa Maria, we sold our home, and my stepfather sold his business. We moved away for about 2 years. We bought back our same house, and my stepfather opened up his same cattle business again. So we came full circle, came back here, and then I've lived on the Central Coast, except for a stint at San Diego State ever since. Yeah.
wow, wow. So you had a wide variety of places that you lived
Yes, yes,
and in different schools and you know it- I
yes.
I grew up in a military family, so I had very similar. Every 3 years we moved.
Yeah, that's
So
challenging in high school.
yeah. So was there anybody in your family who was creative like you or did writing, or was there anybody presenting something saying, "Here, read these books"?
Well, actually, I wouldn't say there were any writers in my family, but there are a lot of readers. My mom was an avid reader. My aunt was a teacher and an avid reader. All of my uncles and aunts were avid readers too. So, you know, I saw literature around me all the time. Yeah. So there was always a book to pick up, and so they were good models for reading. Yes, yeah.
That's great. And that's really good for our audience out there to let them know that. And I've always professed that even when if you're a young mother and you're pregnant, you should be reading to your child before they're born.
Of course. Yes.
Yeah,
I
because
did that with my kids.
yeah,
You know,
great.
when they were teenagers, and they're like, "Mom."
So you did a lot of reading with your kids as well, right?
Of course, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
And then as a longtime educator, of course, did a lot of reading and children's literature to my students. Always made sure to read to my students every day. Yeah. It's
that's
one
great.
of my
So
favorite parts of the day. It's a lot of fun. Yeah.
you left home and went off to college. Where did you go?
I went to San Diego State.
Oh,
And
San Diego State.
actually, yeah, I first majored in social work. You know, what I really wanted to do was to work with abused children. And then when I actually got pregnant in my senior year, and I found myself trying to make a living on a worker's degree, and because my husband and I, we believed that someone should be home, so we weren't going to have like two incomes and then a child in daycare. So we decided that either one or the other was going to be working. And since I had the degree, it made sense that I would try to work. But what I found was social work really couldn't support a family.
Mhm.
So I worked with a rape crisis agency that helped, victims as well as abused children for a time. But then I looked around and I said, well, I have to be able to take care of my family. So I was trying to think, what do I want to do? Well, I had been a lifeguard and swimming teacher for years. And my aunt Linda, wonderful, warm,
Mm.
beautiful woman, said to me, because I was struggling, should I get a master's? What should I do? She said, well, you've always loved teaching. You've always loved kids. Have you ever thought about being a teacher? And I thought, no, I never thought of that, but what a great idea. So I went back to school right before my daughter was born. I got my teaching credential at Cal Poly in San Luis Obispo. Yeah, and
Oh,
I'm
great.
a bilingual teacher on the Central Coast. Yeah, so yeah,
Excellent.
and it was a great career for a mom. Had benefits and all of those sorts of things that you need when you're raising a family. So it worked out really well for my family in that regard. Yeah.
So how many years were you a teacher in education?
Well, in the public schools, I was a teacher for 30 years,
Wow.
but I taught in private schools for a couple years before that too.
Oh,
So
wow.
altogether, close to 35 years.
Okay. Wow. That's a great contribution. How many students have you ever counted out? How many students you've ever
Thousands. Yeah,
impacted?
at least 1,000. I was trying to think, at least 1,000, at least a.
Wow.
And
Wow.
also, while I was a teacher, I was the coach of a reading team called Battle the Books. I was the student council advisor. I worked as an advisor for an anti-bullying group. I worked as a drama coach. I volunteered to do the talent shows, so I would do all the trials for the talent show. And because I had a dancing background, always choreographed dances and did that sort of thing too. So I also worked with other students that were not in my classroom during the whole time, which was, very satisfying and wonderful. Yeah.
So you brought the arts
I
into your
love
teaching, right?
exactly. No, I believe in that.
Yeah.
That's actually kind of the theme of my entire Artania Chronicles books. Um, Years ago, I was an early teacher. It was like one of the first 2 years I was teaching. And you're sitting in one of those, large staff meetings, your eyes are wide and you're excited about, like, oh, what sort of wisdom are they going to impart? And the superintendent of schools at the time, I won't mention names, asked all of us teachers, what do you think is the most important thing you do as a teacher? And I remember thinking, inspire kids, build self-esteem, make them feel good about themselves. And she gave us a couple moments. And then you know what she said? Test scores. Test scores are the most important thing you do as a teacher. And I'm like, what? She said, that is how the public perceives us, and that is how you're accountable to the public. So test scores are the most important thing. Well, at that time, there was the No Child Left Behind Act had been passed, and George Bush was president, and there was a huge emphasis on test scores. And I started to think of, children as they're more than a number. A child is not this, a 700 or a 600 or a 500 or a whatever, numerical you want to give them. Yeah. So whatever number you want to give them on that test, they're unique, beautiful people.
Mhm.
And so I started to imagine that we were killing this beautiful part of children, and that was their artistic side. Because we were told, don't teach art, don't do social studies, don't do drama, don't do all of those things. What you need to do is math and language arts. That's all. Don't worry
Yeah.
about the other stuff. This is back
Yeah.
in the 90s. Um, and it just seemed wrong to me. So that's when I
Mhm.
came with Artania. So Artania is a world created by art. And every time someone puts pen to paper or paint to canvas, a beautiful being is born in this other world. But
Mhm.
Artania is in danger because when people turn away from their true selves, when they stop creating, it gives rise to these monsters I call shadow swine, who are intent on stopping art both in our world and destroying Artania in theirs. Yeah. So,
Wow. So
yeah,
just so
yeah,
the audience knows, this is the beginning of your series,
exactly. Yes,
right?
I have 5 published so far. Yes. Each
Yeah.
one takes place in a different art period. So Artania like is made up of different lands based on art periods, such as the antiquities. That would be into the ancient Greek, Roman, and Egyptian art. There's the Renaissance nation, so that would be, you have Michelangelo and David's art. The Impressionist Republic would have Monet, Manet, and Impressionist art. Cyrilia has surreal art like Frida Kahlo, Salvador Dali, that sort of thing. I have the Asiatic Kingdom, which of course has Asian art. I also have Gothia, which has the Gothic period, kind of the Middle
Mm,
Ages with, dragons and like the Bayeux tapestry and that sort of thing. Um, and each one also has the technology of that day. So whatever art period, and those Artanians live within that land, you know.
wow. That's
It-
great.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
so there's a little theme in there that you brought up about, you know, so if you stop being true to yourself, right? Then what shows up are these dark personas and characters. And say a little bit more about that because I think everybody goes through that. When we're
Exactly.
not being
Yeah,
our true
yeah.
selves, that
Yes,
something
so
else
that gives
shows
rise
up.
to the shadow swan. These, I don't know if you can see, these are shadow swan. Actually,
So on the cover of the book, there's
yes, this is
shadows with two
shadow
kids around.
swan. The
Right.
shadow swan. Yeah, these monsters. They're hunchback, yellow-eyed, slime-covered creatures that look a little bit like orcs. And here on Earth, what they do is they invade dreams and they try to cause art to become a nightmare to people. So people don't
Uh,
want to create anymore. Um, and in Artania, they live underground in a subterranean a place called Subterranea, and they come up from the ground and they capture Artanians and try to turn them into mindless slaves, and then turn Artania to dust is what they do. So, but I have 2 young heroes. I have my 2 young heroes, Alex and Bartholomew are my 2 young heroes, and they are the chosen ones whose art um, is a superpower. Here on Earth, they create knights of painted light that battle the shadow swine when they're trying to invade dreams. So their paintings and their sculptures and so on come to life, and they battle these dreams, these monsters when they're trying to invade dreams here on Earth. When they travel through a portal into Artania, they can create at the speed of light. You know,
wow.
and everything that they create in Artania then turns real. So if they sculpt, a sword, it becomes a real sword, or a skateboard, or if they sculpt an animal, it comes to life and that sort of thing. Yeah. So, and there's a prophecy, and they have to solve 7 of the different tasks before Artania can be saved for another millennium. Yeah, so, and each book, as I said, takes place in a different place. The first book, there have been pharaohs captured, and it's up to them to rescue the pharaohs to keep the land of antiquity safe. And so every book is it also they also teach about art, and
Hmm.
I thoroughly researched each book historically. So
Good.
they're all historically accurate as far as their so when I was early on in the series, I tried to think, how can I have an integrity for it? What sorts of things. I said,
Right.
I'm going to make sure that every creature that's in Artania has to have been, an art piece here on Earth, because there's this mystical connection between our planet and Artania. So that was one thing. And another thing I said was that each of the lands have to be self-contained, so
Hmm.
that it makes sense for the reader that the rules of magic there are like, okay, they have cars in this land, but they don't have cars here,
Right.
And
Right.
really, because when Dolly was alive, it was kind of the 1920s and so on. So, so anyhow, yeah.
So now when a child is reading this, And what age do you focus on? Because if a child is at a certain age, something gets awakened in them. And given that an educator watched this happen in children, there's
Yeah.
certain stories you can't read to a kindergarten, but you
Oh,
can
sure.
read to a fifth grader, you know.
Yeah, this would probably be okay for a good reader from fourth grade up.
Okay.
Someone younger than that would have challenges with all the concepts. And the way that I wrote the novels is I kind of followed the Harry Potter model in that my characters age with each book. So they're 11 in book one, they're 12 in book two, et cetera, et cetera. And
Okay.
I'm starting book six, there'll be 16 in this in book six, and there'll be 17 in book seven, stuff like
I'm curious, have you had children, students, or if you've done any readings, etc., or
that.
written you letters
Oh,
and
sure.
and had them, like, oh my gosh, I saw something in your book. Share a little bit about that.
Well, well, the thing that really excites me is that I tell students that, every time you sketch or paint or draw, there's a magical being born in Artania. And you know what they do immediately? They start to draw.
Yeah. Great.
This is coming to life. Yes, and they draw something else. And so they'll make posters and different things, imagine that they come alive in Artania. And one of my goals as a writer and an educator is to empower children. So
Beautiful.
one of the messages that I try to impart in the Artania series is about empowerment.
Mhm.
That we don't all excel, maybe at math, or we don't all excel at, writing, but we all have something magical inside of us, something creative, and when children do that, when children are being creative, and there's lots of different with drama, dance, singing, art, etc., they're happy. I never had discipline problems in the classroom when I was
Yeah.
doing artistic things, other times, sure, that's when the kids are fooling around and so on. But when you're asking kids to be creative because they're being their unique selves, that's
Mm.
something I believe in. And that's one of the messages that as I said, I try to impart is be your unique self. There's
Right.
no, and I used to tell my students is like, there's no one like you, and there's no one like you. No one can draw or write or sing or dance or even walk like you. Isn't that
Yeah.
wonderful? How exciting that is,
God, yeah, I tell you, I wish I was a fly on the wall in your classrooms. I
Oh, I
would have
had
loved to
fun.
watch
I
that. That would
enjoyed
have
it.
been something.
Yeah.
And then the fact that as you were teaching them this, did they ever come back to you years later and say, my life took a different direction as a
Now
result?
you're gonna make me cry. You're gonna make me cry. Yes, actually, it was my last year was my last year teacher. I knew I was gonna retire. And oddly enough, a couple of wonderful things happened. One was a letter I
Mhm.
got from a former student just talking about how she came to the book signing of my first book when my first book, Forest Secrets, came out, and how she still remembered that and how inspired she was by that. Another student that was in my class years ago happened to be my student teacher. So I
Wow.
got to have my former student, like 10 years later, be a student teacher in my class. And that was a beautiful, beautiful thing to happen as well. And he was awesome. He rocked. He really did. But he remembered, like doing our dances, and he remembered how creative I was. And he used a lot of the similar tools of creativity when
Uh-huh.
he was teaching. Now he works full time at the school that he went to and that he did student teaching at, which is just, I love how things are, going full circle like that.
Well, that's the thing that I'm very impressed by who you were as an educator and also as an author and an artist, a creative artist that you are, is that the impact you've had on young people, and do you see that in yourself that you're, like you said, you have a purpose for being an educator to empower
Exactly.
students. So,
Exactly. That's something that I tried to always be cognizant of, because I this as a teacher.
Yes.
Children are sponges, so you have to be very careful about what you say. And also, especially in today's society where children don't always get the love that they deserve, they look to their teachers, and I
Yes.
can't tell you how many times they called me mom on accident. And they want your approval and they want someone to give them guidance.
Yes.
And I took that very, very seriously as an educator, and tried to, give them impart as much wisdom as I could, you know,
Yes.
from, my background and so on, because I'm very blessed to have had, I had a social work background. I also had wonderful mentors myself in both
Hmm.
school and in college. I was very blessed with that. And when I was at San Diego State, I lived in a wonderful home that was run by Campus Christian Ministries, and it was called Intersection House. And just to be a resident, you had to get voted in, and you had to be doing good works in the community in order to be voted in. So we did things like we had a open policy for crashers. So if someone was homeless, they could sleep in our living room, or if they were passing through. We fed people down in the jail in Tijuana. We worked on world hunger. We had dance-a-thons for world hunger. We worked on peace. Every Tuesday night we had vegetarian suppers where we invited the community in, and so on. And we had a wonderful minister who he's passed away now, Dave Bernal, that kind of guided us in communication, and we called them house meetings and that sort of thing, and learning how to be assertive with others in a kind and respectful way. So as I said, I've been very, very blessed in my life. I've had wonderful teachers in my own life, and I've taken a lot of their wisdom and hopefully passed it on to my students as well.
Well, it's not hard to see that your creation of Artania was from your experience of great people in your life.
Exactly. Yeah.
So that's really great that you've had that surrounding yourself. Can you say a little bit more about because I noticed also that you talked about the subject of bullying and when those monsters come in
That's
and
another theme in all my books. Yeah.
okay, good. So
'Cause
talk.
I was bullied horribly as a child.
Oh, really?
Oh
Wow.
yes, yes, and I come from an abusive background as well. So I was dealing with the background of abuse. My mother was abused, and I was abused physically as a child, and at the same time I was being bullied
Hmm.
horribly. I mean kids, freak dog, like you know grabbing you, just and I was very, very shy and didn't know what to do. So I just let them bully me and just would run home crying. And
Hmm.
I would just and I internalized a lot of their negative words into my own psyche. And so I didn't have a very positive self-image at that time.
Hmm.
That's not what I wanted for my students. I wanted to empower them. I wanted them to learn that you have the power. You can stand up to bullies, and it doesn't mean you have to punch them in the nose. You
Right.
you can say, "Hey, that's not cool. I don't like it, and if you don't stop, I'm going to tell the teacher." I mean, it can be as simple as that. So there,
Right.
and one thing I also did explain to Mike is you can use your words is what we would say. But there are times when you do need to immediately enlist the help of an adult. If someone is violent, or if someone is much larger than you, or in the case of an adult, or something like that, then you would need to enlist other help. But for the most part, I sought to make kids work out their conflicts themselves. Like if two kids came in, oh, she's doing this, and how kids can come into from a class from
Right.
like yell
Right.
at each other, and you're like, okay, stop. So what I would do is I talked to them about a few tools at the beginning of the year, but then once I had given them these few communication tools on how to use iMessages and so on, if a conflict would occur, I say, okay, you two are going to go outside the door, and this is what you're going to do. You're going to come up with a win-win solution. A win-win solution is where you both feel like winners. Okay, and you're not to come back in until you both feel like winners. I'm not gonna be a mediator for you. I'm not gonna fix it. You're gonna fix it. And most of the time they did. There was, there were some situations where you just couldn't do that, where perhaps the children had too much trauma in their lives, or there was just too much anger, or they just really weren't ready for that. But I would say like probably 9 times out of 10, the students could work it out themselves. And then they come in and they're friends again. They're like
Yes.
their arms around each other. They're like, oh yeah. Instead, but if I had just fixed it, one might feel like that I fixed it correctly, the other might feel, slighted. And then also that's me taking away their power of conflict resolution. I don't want to take away a child's power. I want to give them power. So that
Right.
that was one of the things that we did, is we tried to help kids. We talked about there's three ways you can deal with any conflict. You can have a lose-lose situation. So if someone comes up to you and starts to bully you, punch them in the face and you get in a fight and you're both in trouble. That's lose-lose.
Right.
You're both in the principal's office. There's a win-lose situation. Someone comes up to you, bullies you, says, give me your lunch money. You give them their lunch money. You go cry. They feel like a winner. Okay, so that's a win-lose. Or you can have a win-win solution to a conflict. Someone comes up to you, says, give me your lunch money. You say, no, I'm not going to give it to you. And if you keep bugging me, I'll just tell. Yeah.
So,
And, and then you feel empowered, and it's win-win. Yeah.
so your books are really empowering students when they
That's
read.
actually, I would say that all of my published books so far have a bullying element in them. Yes, they do.
That's good.
Yes.
Yeah.
My first book is Forest Secrets, and here it is right here.
And the
Yeah,
reason why I said that's good is that it's good because it brings
that is,
out the
that is
in the
my
young
first.
person, it brings out the ability to be empowered. But
Exactly, same thing. This has an anti-bullying component as well.
okay, good.
One of the characters has been bullied, and the other character talks about empowerment. And also, I would say that the two nefarious characters that are trying to illegally log in the forest are bullies as well, and they bully poor Kalyandra, who's like a half tree, half human creature that's been separated from her parents, and now she just wants to find her way home. Yeah, so anyhow,
That's
yeah,
a
it's a
beautiful
good book for
cover.
you too. Oh, thank
Beau-
you. Yes,
Beautiful cover.
I
That's
was
Forest of Secrets, right?
Forest Secret. Yeah,
Forest Secrets.
that's my
Okay.
first book that came out. Yes, yes.
Okay, great, great. That now, if there are educators out there listening, this you might want to consider Laurie's books as a great way to teach this in your classrooms, and yet great literature at the same
Oh,
time. You
oh,
know,
thank you very much. Yes, I've got good reviews on that. One thing that in early drafts with Forest Secrets, I had Daisy as like a Caucasian girl. And then I started to look around my classroom because I was teaching, and I looked at all my students' faces, and I looked at the school library too, and I realized that there weren't enough books with characters that looked like my students. And so I changed my protagonist and made her Daisy Castillo. She's Hispanic, and she's spunky and fun. Well, she just happened, but it's not about being Hispanic. She just happens to be
yeah.
Hispanic, and she uncovers this plot in the forest and has an adventure. Yeah, and the kids really enjoyed that, because I would, this is a book because it's shorter. It's only like 175 pages or something. I would read this in literature circles with my students, and they really enjoy the Spanish. They enjoy the references to menudo and things like that.
No,
So it was really powerful for me to see that kids are like, oh, I can relate to Daisy, so that was nice. That was really nice. Yeah. So that's an aside. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
want to now get into and shift it a little bit. The first time that you wrote your rough draft and then had it edited and you sent it off to a publisher, right? Is that your process that you went through, and what it
Um,
was like to have your book become a reality? What was that like? That
with Forest Secrets, it was as I said, it was my first book, and I did send it out a lot. and I actually hired an editor. I hired both an editor for content and later an editor for, like, commas and periods and grammar, a more grammatical editor. And I tried to get it published for, I don't know, 5 years maybe. I sent it out,
Mhm.
lots of rejections. So I did self-publish Forest Secrets.
Okay, great.
It's
Got
my
it.
only self-published book. Um, but I'm very proud of that.
No, that's
I'm
great.
what you might call a blended author. I have, I self-published, I have traditionally published, I have co-written, so
Yeah,
yeah.
you collaborated on a few books, correct?
Dean and JoJo I did.
Yeah.
So I had a dear friend, Dean Bernal, and many years ago he was living in the Turks and Caicos Islands, and there was a wild lone dolphin, and dolphins are social animals, and this one's pod, it looks like, had been killed in a hurricane, and so JoJo was alone. So Dean was teaching scuba diving and snorkeling in the Turks and Caicos at the time, and at the end of classes, he would go swimming, and this dolphin started to follow him around and hang out with him and stuff, and they became great friends. Well, JoJo became in danger of many things. One was, at that time they allowed jet skis and
Yeah.
skiing in that area of the Turks and Caicos, and he was hit multiple times. So sometime, couple of times, Dean actually gave him medicine, applied first aid to JoJo because he nearly died. So Dean became his advocate. He became an outspoken spokesperson for JoJo in trying to ban, skiing in JoJo's area. There was talk of capturing JoJo, and he helped to fight that and so on. So, yeah, and so it ended up being in many of the IMAXs, an IMAX film, Dolphins. He was Dean was interviewed by Robin Williams when he was alive for Into the Wild, which is on PBS. He was on many news programs and so on. And most recently, JoJo's still alive, amazingly.
Wow.
And most recently on Animal Planet, Dean was on Animal
Okay.
Planet. So, and Dean's the one that taught me about a win-win solution. Like, there was, as I said, JoJo was like kind of harassing some people at hotels and stuff. And so some of the patrons were getting upset, and hotels were talking about, well, maybe we should get JoJo captured and go put him in a cage, basically. And Dean said, oh, I don't want that to happen to JoJo. He's a wild dolphin. So Dean came up with a great win-win solution, in that he went to the schools and started a campaign to make JoJo like what's the word I'm thinking of, when it's like your the animal of your school. What's that called?
Mascot.
A mascot, yeah, to make JoJo like the mascot of Turks and Caicos. Well, that campaign took off. Then all of a sudden, you can't capture the dolphin that's now the mascot of your
All right.
country, that's become a symbol of your country. So without really fighting in court or hurting anybody, or calling people names or anything, he was able to keep JoJo free. So that's just, it's a beautiful story of friendship that spanned decades, and how they each helped each other. Actually, there was also another time when Dean was snorkeling with some friends, and he didn't realize this, but he later is like, he had people waving when he was coming up from the ocean. Well, JoJo had been fighting off a hammerhead shark that
Whoa.
was near Dean. So
Wow.
they both helped each other. They were true friends, and Dean now is a very strong proponent of protecting, wild, especially cetaceans around the world, and
Right.
he's actually in that area right now. I recently spoke with him. Yeah, so
Wow. What an amazing story.
it is an amazing. It's very inspirational. It's a beautiful story. Yeah, Dean and JoJo. Yes.
Well,
Yeah.
you've had an extraordinary life, and now you have an extraordinary future. What do you see happening with your books? Particularly, I think these are movie worthy,
Oh,
made.
well, thank you so much. Actually, I
So,
did work on that. A couple of years ago, same thing. I'd written 8 or 9 novels, and I do like a challenge, and I also thought, why not? So I started to study screenwriting, and so I adapted both Forest Secrets and Artania to the screen, and I had a wonderful mentor that I work with, Leland Douglas, who's a longtime Hollywood screenwriter. He actually just came out with a wonderful, heartwarming film called Nutcrackers, starring Ben Stiller. So if you haven't seen it, you should see it.
okay,
It's on Hulu. And he mentored me for about a year or so on, and then I've had some interest. I actually had an option agreement on the table, and I'm not quite sure what's happening there. So I'm in negotiation. I'll put it this way. I've been in negotiations for the last 6 months or so in trying to bring Artania to the screen. I have a very, very well-honed screenplay. I have what's called a lookbook, which is a slideshow. I believe I shared
right.
with you, a slideshow that you use in the business to attract prospective investors and talent and that sort of thing. So,
Yes.
and I'm very, very pleased with the direction. They did wonderful art. Oh my gosh.
It's
Actually,
like a portfolio,
yes.
right?
Yeah.
So,
So this is just some of the art that they did right here. Here's a
that
map
just beautiful pictures
of art. Yeah, it's a map of Artania. So this is
right.
John White. He's just a master. And
Yeah.
he did this. He did this beautiful map that shows the different worlds of Artania, which I thought
Yes.
I was just thrilled with what he did there. Yeah. So that's just one of the images that he created. He created, gosh, 25 maybe.
Wow.
So beautifully done. And it was so cool when I first we had a Zoom meeting with the whole team. When I first saw the slideshow, I was like, oh my gosh, it's like you got inside my head.
Yeah, that's
I imagine
great.
Arcadia looked like. It was just like, wow, wow, wow. Because it's very different concept. The idea of a whole world made of art, walking art pieces, they're like 3D art pieces. I mean, so some people have trouble kind of wrapping their heads around it. The visual really helps with that. Yeah. So
Well,
I'm working on that, and I've been pitching to different executives and trying to sell it. That's kind of where I'm at right now. I've been, it,
well, I really see these being a movie someday, and
oh, thank you very much.
especially in the realm of Lord of the Rings and all those other books,
That's
so
that's kind of what I imagine. I imagine a Narnia sort of look,
right.
to the movie when it gets made.
Yeah,
So
that's
that's what
great. Well,
um,
if there are people listening or watching and they want to get your books, how would they get their hands on your books?
well, I'm all over the place online.
Okay.
Barnes and Noble, Walmart, Target, you can go online, you can look for my name. I'm also on Amazon, I'm on Apple. My books are available in, gosh, 3, 4 languages. So if you Spanish, French, Italian, I believe are
Wow.
the 3 languages. I also have audiobooks. Probably the easiest for people is Amazon because so many people have access to Amazon.
Right.
But I have Google Books, all you name it. My publisher is Next Chapter Publishing. Next
Okay.
Chapter Publishing. They're also available through Next Chapter Publishing. They can just Google my name to just Laurie Woodward Books, and they should just pop right up. Yeah. So yeah, as I said, I
Fantastic.
mostly write fantasy, but I did write one book that is Finding Joy, which is a little bit autobiographical, actually a lot of autobiographical, about a
Mhm.
young girl kind of using drugs and alcohol to navigate her way to adulthood with the backdrop of abuse, and bullying and what that's like for her. So anyhow, so that was a hard book to write.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
I
wrote a
I
very
bet.
hard.
Well,
Yeah,
you're really sharing your, your vulnerable side of your life.
exactly. Yeah, I was.
But you are a courageous person because look, it takes courage to put out in the world your artistic endeavors, and I congratulate
Oh,
you for
oh,
that.
thank you. Because it does feel vulnerable. It really
Yeah.
does. Because where it comes from. You're an artist yourself. You know what
Yes.
that's like. And to put your heart out there and say that here's my heart, and then some people just like, oh, give it 1 star, give it 2 stars,
Right.
My
Right.
heart, but that's my heart.
Yeah.
Yes. But I'm trying to branch out. And right now, as I said, I love a challenge. So I'm writing a science fiction book. I call it Murmurations. Yeah. So it's this story of an ornithologist with a troubled past who stumbles upon a starling murmuration,
Hmm.
which is a flocking of starlings, and many birds flock, but only starlings murmurate and make these beautiful um, shapes and columns and that sort of thing. And then she sees the murmuration go backwards. And later she finds herself in the murmuration and discovers that this is the fuel for traveling through time. And she ends up um, going on an adventure through time, that
Wow.
makes her want to heal, some of the wounds of the past and so on. So I've had a lot of fun with that. It's
I
been
bet.
challenging though. It's yeah. So I'm the working title is Murmurations. I just started chapter 59 today, so I'm on chapter 50.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, that's
Yeah,
what
so I'm
gives you.
trying to finish. I have wanted to finish it by the end of the year, but I didn't quite get to it. So I'm trying to finish it. I'm trying to finish Murmurations.
Well, now that you're no longer teaching, you've got all that time on your hands to really create some great stories. And I
Yes.
just, I just thank you, Laurie, for your dedication, the contribution you made to young people,
Um,
and the inspiration you are for young people to write, to be creative, and just the world's a better place because of you. So
oh, well, thank you so much, Phil. That's so nice of you to say.
you're
Say
welcome, and
right
I hope.
back at you.
Oh,
Yeah.
thanks.
I
And
follow you. I follow you on Facebook, and you're always trying to do inspirational things with your life. I see that.
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. And I encourage people to look up Laurie's books. And if you're an educator, particularly to use them in your classroom, you say fifth grade and above. And it's a really great teaching tool. I mean, she is a teacher, put it to test in her classroom and it worked. So you're listening to someone who's been on the court with this. So just amazing what you've done. And Laurie, it's been a really great privilege to have you on the show. And so thank you. Anything else you wanted to share before we go?
I don't think so. It's been a pleasure to be here. It's been a pleasure to see you too. Nice
Oh,
to see you.
great. Good to see you too and be with you. And I hope people get a lot out of this and they get a hold of your books and start finding that Artania in themselves, you know.
I hope so.
So because
To
I
find
think
that true art that comes from inside that beautiful place inside of all of us. Yes.
and you started out with the when that superintendent was a superintendent or a principal, was it administrator who
Super.
said, yeah,
Yes.
test, 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 right?
Mhm.
But the one thing you can't measure, you can measure math scores, you can measure science questions, but art and self expression is not something that can be measured. And I loved that you saw that. So thank you for bringing that out in young people so that they can really be a whole person rather than, "Yeah, I didn't pass the test, therefore I'm a failure." You know.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. You're here.
So great. All right, Lori. Well, thank you again. And I wish you for a great year and that we see another book and in the future, a movie.
Okay. Thank you so much.
All right.
Have a
Thanks.
great day. Okay.
You
Thank you.
too.
Bye bye.